The night my fiancé dumped me over the phone, I only wanted one thing. A simple hug from my best friend Sandra. But when her arms wrapped around me in my empty apartment overlooking the Hudson River, and her lips found mine in what was meant to be comfort, the spark that ignited between us wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something deeper, something dangerous. In that moment I realized I had been lying to myself for years about what I truly wanted. Sandra pulled back, her blue eyes wide with the same shock I felt. Jasmine, I didn't mean to. But I silenced her with another kiss, because denying it now would be impossible. We were both rising stars at Apex Dynamics, the most competitive management consulting firm in New York, where promotions were won with blood and alliances broken with whispers. Admitting this, our lesbian love would be professional suicide. The partners were old school, the board ruthless, and our rivals would use any weakness to claw their way to the top. We spent the rest of that night talking in low voices on my couch, the city lights flickering through the rain-streaked windows. Sandra's hand stayed in mine the whole time, her thumb tracing small circles that sent electricity up my arm. "No one can know," she whispered. "Not at the office. Not ever." I nodded, even as my heart hammered with equal parts fear and exhilaration. The next morning she left before dawn, slipping out like a shadow. At the office on the 42nd floor of the glass tower on Park Avenue, we were back to being Jasmine and Sandra, the two women everyone bet on for the open vice president slot. Mr. Harlan, our managing partner, called a team meeting at 9 sharp. "The Mercer merger pitch is in 6 weeks, he announced, eyes scanning the room. "Only one of you will lead it. The other gets to watch." His gaze lingered on us a second too long. I felt Sandra stiffen beside me, but we both smiled the same polished smile we'd practiced for years. That afternoon I buried myself in spreadsheets, trying to ignore the memory of her lips. By 6 o'clock the floor had emptied except for the cleaning crew. Sandra appeared in my doorway, coat already on. "Walk with me to the subway?" Her voice was casual for anyone listening. In the elevator we stood 3 feet apart, but the air crackled. On the platform she finally spoke. "Last night was real, Jasmine. But so is this job. We keep them separate or we lose both." I wanted to argue, but the train roared in and swallowed my words. The following weeks blurred into a grind of 14-hour days. We stole moments where we could, a brushed hand in the copy room, a text at midnight that said "only thinking of you." At the cabin upstate that first weekend we escaped to, the world narrowed to just us. Under wool blankets by the fireplace she told me about growing up in Ohio, how she'd hidden who she was from her conservative family to chase this exact life. I told her about the engagement ring I'd thrown in the river the night my ex called it off, how I'd always felt something missing until her mouth met mine. But even there, ambition crept in. Over coffee the next morning she mentioned a confidential client brief she'd been handed. "I can't share the details," she said quietly. "It would give me the edge on Mercer." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I forced a smile. Of course. Business is business. Back in Manhattan the pressure mounted. Mark, the slick associate gunning for our spots, started dropping hints in meetings. "You two have been thick as thieves lately," he said one afternoon, smirking. The room chuckled, but I caught the calculating glint in his eye. Sandra laughed it off with her usual charm. Yet later in the ladies' room she gripped the sink until her knuckles whitened. "We're being watched. We have to be colder at work." I agreed, but every night when she came to my apartment the coldness melted the second the door closed. The conflict tore at me. I loved her, but I also loved the corner office I'd sacrificed everything to reach. How long could we keep pretending the two halves of our lives didn't exist in the same city? The first real fracture came on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and burnt coffee. I was alone in the war room at 11 p.m., finalizing the Mercer financial model, when Sandra slipped in carrying 2 takeout cups. She set one beside me without a word. Our fingers brushed and lingered. For 30 seconds the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then she spoke. "I just heard Harlan is moving the pitch date up. He wants a preliminary deck by Friday." My stomach dropped. I had planned to use the extra week to refine my section. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, keeping my voice level. Inside, suspicion flickered. Why tell me unless she wanted something in return? She read my face. "Don't look at me like that, Jasmine. I'm not playing you." But the doubt had already taken root. The next morning I stayed late again, deliberately leaving a printed copy of my revised slides on my desk, the version with the stronger numbers. When I returned from the restroom, the papers had been moved. Not much, just an inch, but enough. I checked the security log on my computer. Sandra had swiped her badge at 6:42 a.m. My pulse hammered. She'd come in early. She'd seen my work. I confronted her in the stairwell during lunch, the only place without cameras. "Did you look at my deck?" She didn't flinch. I needed to know where I stood. "You would have done the same." The honesty stung worse than denial. "We said we wouldn't let this touch work." "Work is touching us," she shot back. "Harlan already pulled me aside yesterday asking why our styles have become so similar lately. We're bleeding into each other, Jasmine. One of us has to win. The firm only rewards one." That night she didn't come over. I sat on my couch staring at the city until 3 a.m., replaying every conversation. Love had always felt like a safe harbor. Now it felt like quicksand. The next day I made my first cold decision. I emailed Harlan a revised version of the client brief Sandra had refused to share with me, the one I'd quietly copied from her unsecured laptop the week before. I attached a note. Thought this might strengthen the team's position. I hit send before I could change my mind. Within hours the office buzzed. Harlan praised my initiative in the afternoon stand-up. Sandra's face stayed perfectly neutral, but I saw the flicker in her eyes when our gazes met across the conference table. That evening she waited for me in the parking garage. "You went through my files." It wasn't a question. "You went through mine first," I answered. We stood there under the harsh fluorescent lights. Two women who had once shared everything now measuring each other like opponents. "This is what survival looks like," she said quietly. "I just didn't think we'd have to survive each other." She walked away first. I drove home with the radio off, the silence louder than any argument. The following week the Mercer client requested a private strategy session. Only 2 consultants allowed. Harlan chose Sandra and me. On the train to Connecticut we sat side by side in business class, knees touching under the tray table, yet we barely spoke. At the client's estate she delivered her section flawlessly. I countered with data I'd withheld from her. The client leaned forward, impressed. On the ride back she finally broke the silence. "You're better at this game than I gave you credit for." "Same," I said. Neither of us smiled. The Mercer win came 3 weeks later, but it tasted like ash. Harlan announced in the all-hands meeting that both Sandra and I would co-lead the implementation. A consolation prize that fooled no one. Mark muttered loud enough for the room to hear. "Guess the girls get to share the trophy." Laughter rippled. Sandra's jaw tightened, but she congratulated me publicly with the same polished grace she used on clients. Privately, in the elevator after everyone left, she cornered me. "Co-lead means we have to be in constant contact. How do we do that without everyone noticing?" "We act like professionals," I said. "The way we always have." But acting was getting harder. The late strategy sessions in my apartment blurred the line between work and us. One night, after arguing over resource allocation for 30 minutes, she suddenly pulled me into a kiss so fierce it knocked the breath out of me. We ended up on the couch, clothes half unbuttoned, whispering promises we both knew we might break. The next morning I woke to an email from HR. Anonymous complaint filed about inappropriate favoritism between 2 senior associates. No names, but the timing was unmistakable. Sandra read it over my shoulder, her face pale. "Mark," she said flatly. "He's been circling like a shark." We spent the weekend drafting responses, rehearsing stories, deciding how much truth to bury. On Monday Harlan called us both in. "I don't care what's true," he said, closing the door. "I care what it looks like. Fix it or I'll fix it for you." That night Sandra didn't come over. Instead she sent a single text. "We need space until this blows over." I stared at the screen until it went black. Space felt like punishment. The complaint investigation dragged. Mark smirked every time he passed my desk. I threw myself into the Mercer rollout with a ferocity that surprised even me, working until my eyes burned. Sandra did the same on her side of the project. We communicated through shared drives and terse emails, never meeting alone. The distance carved something hollow inside me. Then came the leak. An internal memo I had written critical of the client's risk tolerance appeared on a rival firm's desk. The client called Harlan screaming. Fingers pointed everywhere, but the metadata traced back to my computer. I knew I hadn't sent it. Only one person had access to my files besides me. I found Sandra in the copy room after hours. Did you do it? She didn't blink. I protected the project. You were about to torpedo the relationship with your conservative projections. I adjusted them. You sabotaged me. I saved both our jobs, she corrected. The client is happy now. You're welcome. The betrayal burned hotter than any kiss. I walked out without another word. The next board meeting was scheduled for Friday. Promotion decisions would be finalized. Sandra and I sat on opposite sides of the long mahogany table, avoiding each other's eyes while Harlan praised the Mercer numbers. Mark presented his own project, solid but unremarkable. When it was my turn, I delivered the revised, bolder projections Sandra had secretly altered. The board nodded approvingly. Sandra's face remained unreadable. After the meeting, Harlan pulled me aside. Your numbers saved the account. The VP slot is yours if you want it. He paused. But I need to know there won't be any more distractions. Any more complications. I understood the warning. One word about Sandra and the offer vanished. That evening I went to her apartment unannounced. She opened the door in sweatpants, hair messy, eyes tired. For the first time since the kiss months ago, she looked vulnerable. They offered me the promotion, I said. She nodded slowly. Congratulations. I haven't accepted yet. Silence stretched. Then she stepped aside so I could enter. We sat on her couch, the same one where we had first admitted everything, and the words tumbled out. I told her about the HR complaint, the leaked memo, the board's subtle pressure. She listened without interrupting, then spoke. I did what I had to do. You would have too if our positions were reversed. Maybe, I admitted. But where does that leave us? She reached for my hand. It leaves us with a choice. We can keep pretending until one of us cracks, or we can walk away from the firm together. Start something new where we don't have to hide. The offer hung in the air like smoke. Leaving Apex meant giving up the salary, the prestige, the future I had bled for. Staying meant losing her. I stayed the night. We didn't talk about work again. But in the morning I left before she woke, the decision still unmade. The final week before the announcement was pure torture. Sandra and I moved through the office like ghosts, polite in public, radio silent in private. Mark filed a second complaint, this time naming us both. Harlan called an emergency meeting. I'm shutting this down, he said. One of you is getting the VP role. The other is being reassigned to the London office. Effective immediately. Choose who goes. He left the room. Sandra and I stared at each other across the table. You take it, she said quietly. You've always been the better rainmaker. No, I answered. You've sacrificed more. Your family still doesn't know. This job is all you have. The irony was brutal. Each of us trying to give the other the very thing that would separate us. That night we met at the cabin again. No work laptops, no spreadsheets. Just us and the fire. She cried for the first time I had ever seen, and I held her until the logs burned to embers. I love you, she whispered. But I hate what this place has turned us into. I woke before dawn with the answer clear. I would decline the promotion. I would request the London transfer myself. Sandra could stay, rise, become everything she had fought for. I would start over across an ocean. It was the only way to protect what we had left. I drove back to the city alone, rehearsing the conversation. But when I reached her building, Mark was waiting in the lobby. Harlan knows, he said, holding up his phone. Someone sent him photos from the cabin last weekend. You two weren't as careful as you thought. My blood ran cold. The boardroom on Friday morning felt like a courtroom. Harlan sat at the head. Mark beside him with printed photos spread across the table, grainy but unmistakable. Sandra and I stood side by side for the first time in weeks. Explain, Harlan demanded. There was no point in lying. I told the truth. The breakup, the kiss, the months of hiding, the compromises, the betrayals. Sandra added the parts one left out. The room stayed silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Harlan leaned back. The firm cannot be associated with this. Both of you are out, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear your desks. We walked out together, heads high, past the staring associates. In the elevator, Sandra took my hand openly for the first time in public. "We're free," she said. But freedom tasted like ash. 3 months later, I was consulting independently from a small office in Brooklyn. Sandra had moved to Chicago, joining a boutique firm that valued her talent over gossip. We video called every night, but the distance grew in ways that had nothing to do with miles. The trust we had broken in those final weeks never fully mended. Last week she told me she had started seeing someone. A woman who worked in a completely different industry, someone with no power to take anything from her. I congratulated her. Then I cried in the shower where no one could hear. I still love her. I probably always will. But love in the arena we chose came with rules neither of us could follow without destroying the other. Was sacrificing everything we built for the chance to be honest the right decision, or the ultimate wrong that proved ambition and love can never truly coexist?